The National Student Financial Aid Scheme is expected to give an update on the governance issues at the fund. Freeman Nomvalo was appointed administrator in April, and he's expected to speak about developments in the implementation of his mandate as the NSFAS administrator. NSFAS has been in the news over non-payment of accommodation fees, tuition fees and other allowances. Students and student bodies have been calling for reforms in the scheme's management. For an appraisal of the state of affairs at NSFAS so far, since it was put under administration, I'm joined by the South African Union of Students spokesperson, Asive Dlanjwa. Good morning, Asive. Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it. As SAUS, you have historically been deeply critical of the way that NSFAS has been administered. We heard from the new Minister of Higher Education, Nobuhle Nkabane, who says that she will re-establish the NSFAS Board of Directors. She will be hiring new executives. This new administrator, Freeman Nomvalo's term would be shortened to as early as December this year and not March as originally scheduled. Do you believe that things are now moving in the right direction?
Good morning, Iman, and also to your viewers and your listeners, and thank you for having us. Look, where the scheme is currently at, it's at a much better place than it was a few months ago. There has been a level of stability under the leadership of the administrator. Some of the issues that, for instance, we had been at pains to try and get them resolved prior to his arrival, including the issue of allowances, including the issue of the abolishment of the illegally appointed service providers, etc. So much of those things have been done. Much progress has also been made in the way of concluding appeals. So there has been a stability. It is also testament to the fact that, or rather evidenced by the fact that you would also have not seen any protest actions in the last few months. So for the most part, there has been stability that has been brought by under the leadership of Mr. Nomvalo.
You have been raising concerns about everything from the disbursement contract systems and management deficiencies. What are you hoping to hear from Freeman Nomvalo today?
Look, you are correct. There has been huge issues in the past there, and although we give a level of a relative vote of confidence to his leadership in the past few months, there are still a few outstanding issues that need to be dealt with. For instance, the issue of the competence of the staff at NSFAS still remains. It is still filled with a lot of incompetent staff. Those are issues that still need to be addressed. There are still many vacant critical positions, including, for instance, but not limited to the position of the CEO, of the CFO, etc. So those are all things that need to be dealt with. So what we expect to hear from Mr. Nomvalo today, obviously, would be an update on how far we've come since he has taken it over. There is also the issue of some of the service providers that would have taken NSFAS to court, owing to their abolishment. So you must also take the nation into confidence as to what will happen as far as that is concerned, etc. So yeah, we are looking to hear about those things, but we're also expecting that he might, suspecting that he might allude or speak to some of the intentions of the minister, for instance, to shorten his term and bring about a board and an executive before the end of the year. So those are some of the things that we think that the administrator would speak to, and we more or less look forward to that.
The previous minister, Dr. Blade Nzimande, will say he did what he could. He dissolved the previous NSFAS board because they failed to implement recommendations that were set out in that Werksman's report, which alleges that the appointment of those 4 fintech companies to run the direct payment system was mired in corruption. He will say he appointed the administrator Nomvalo, that they did try to terminate the direct payment service providers, but were thwarted by court action because NSFAS was then forced to bring those 4 companies back into the fold, and that matter has since gone back to court. Do you believe that he did enough to remedy the situation?
No, absolutely not. Because you see, the issues that the former minister would be speaking to, that you refer to now, were issues that were meant to save what had been a sinking ship, the sinking ship that had began to sink based on the decisions that he and his friends had taken. I say friends because we have long, for months on end, had long contended that the people that were at the helm of NSFAS were useless and they were incompetent, and therefore there was no objective a reason why they were leading at NSFAS, except for the fact that they might have been maybe friends. So the point here is that the issue of the service providers should have never been abolished in the first place, because they should have never been there in the very first place. When we called for direct payment, we said the money must come from NSFAS to students. We never said direct service providers must be hired who illegally, and then which you will now have a problem of trying to terminate them at the end. So all of those issues, there should have been no Vekman's report, because it came about because of issues that we had said they should not have been done in the very first place. So all of the issues that ultimately had to be, for instance, for us, we've always maintained that the Vekman's report for us, for instance, the outcome of that investigation was a vindication to us, because those are all things we had been saying, giving the minister and everyone who was responsible the opportunity to deal with those things before it got to the point at which they got. So they did a dismal job, and this is why we find ourselves here today. They almost collapsed the scheme last year, because in the history of the scheme, it was the first time that students would go on to write their final year examinations and their mid-year examinations without allowances, without food, without toiletries, without any necessities, some of them without a place to sleep. It was a complete state of disaster.
Yeah.
So the reality is that there is nothing that they saved. We are hoping now that in the new administration that we'll begin to turn the scheme around and stabilize it for the better and for the interest of the poor and the working class.
Asive, the African Transformation Movement, the ATM, has now welcomed a decision by the Office of the Public Protector to refer its complaint regarding the alleged embezzlement of funds by the minister, and we're talking about Dr. Blade Nzimande, and the chairperson of the National Student Financial Aid Scheme, Dr. Ernest Khoza, to the Special Investigation Unit. And it also relates to matters involving alleged corruption, maladministration and mismanagement of funds at NSFAS. What's your reaction to that development?
Look, if there has been, as we have contended for the longest of time, but if anyone has, as alleged, has taken the funds that were meant to service the poor and the working class, that the law must come down on them as hard and as harshly as possible. We welcome all efforts within our legislative spectrum to ensure that all legal avenues are used to ensure that we are able to bring everyone to account who would have allegedly looted from the poor. So we welcome all and any interventions to that regard, from all our entities, from the public protector to the Special Investigative Unit, and just generally our law enforcement. We're saying let the law take its course. We will not preempt the processes. We will wait for them. But the principle that stands is that the law enforcement and generally yes, a law enforcement must take actions against anyone who is alleged. Investigations must be done, and in the event that those people have been found to be guilty, that the harshest possible measures must be taken against them, because they have looted from the poor, and that is one of the greatest sins that any person given responsibility can commit whilst in office.
Asive, when we talk about the new minister, and you've given, your approval in a sense, or your assent to the direction in which he's taking all of this, and this is Nobuhle Nkabane. What's the missing link here? I mean, do you think that students, as the primary stakeholders, the affected community, the directly affected community, should be on these boards? I mean, what's been the picture in the past? Is there that stakeholder engagement? Have you felt it previously? Are you hoping for that during this seventh administration?
Look, there has been a level of participation, extensive and reasonable participation from students and stakeholders within that sector. What we just see is that a lack of will, often from political leadership, to accede to the counsel of those participants. So even with the previous administration, it was not for the lack of a counsel from ourselves to say this will probably get you into trouble, this is probably what is best for the sector, but there would often be no will. So if the new minister, Dr. Nobuhle, is going to do anything right this term, it will be that to heed and accede and to have and be committed to acting on the council of stakeholders within the sector, and not to run her own fiefdom, or as it were, in the previous administration. Then there will be no issues. We don't even need to sit on the boards. There are former student leaders, for instance, who are qualified, who are competent, who are now professionals, who qualify to sit on those boards. They must sit on those boards. We encourage the minister to appoint them. But we are saying over and above that, she must heed to the counsel of the stakeholders within the sector, and there will not be a crisis. It is only when you seek to do things outside the counsel of the sector that you land yourself in the state that the sixth administration did. So that would be our advice to her. For instance, one thing I must also probably say in this interview, although we've been engaging with some of her colleagues, we have written to her maybe 3-4 weeks ago to meet with her. She still hasn't responded. That in itself, whilst we welcome her appointment, but that in itself can suggest that maybe she might easily also fall into the trap of the former minister. And we want to say that she must take the voices of students seriously. Otherwise, she will be befallen by the fate that would have her predecessor.